Welcome back to Turning Point Tonight, where we are charting the course of America's cultural comeback. A lot of stuff going on at the White House, which there's always a lot of stuff going on at the White House. And here to talk about that is Turning Point's White House correspondent, Monica Page. Monica, thanks for joining us. Lots of talk about illegals. I'm sorry, let me use the appropriate term. Illegal aliens. Can you tell us about what the White House is doing today and is on their docket?
If you want to be even more politically correct, Jobob, you could say they're migrants. But yeah, there is a lot going on here today at the White House behind closed doors, of course. But we haven't really heard or seen from much of President Trump's cabinet members today. Usually they come up and down Pebble Beach doing interviews. We saw Caroline Levitt just earlier this morning, but she didn't really give any sort of hints as to what the executive order could be this late afternoon. President Trump hasn't signed it yet at this time, but by the time you guys are probably watching this, he probably has already signed it. But there have been talks, whether this is the executive order coming today or it's going to be coming very, very soon, is President Trump looking to abolish sanctuary cities throughout the United States. We know that illegal immigration was really a forefront of his campaign promises and trying to crack down on illegal immigration, trying to stop the flow of illegal aliens. More than 300 suspects on the terror watch list crossing over the border throughout President Biden's 4 years. So President Trump really making this a priority of his. And what's interesting is that the news coming out is that there is no set way to describe or define what a city is, given that a lot of these are like little pockets throughout the entire United States. So they're calling them sanctuary jurisdictions. Now, there are about 600 of these sanctuary jurisdictions throughout the entire United States. And President Trump is arguing that, these little areas across the United States are really protecting criminals. They're protecting illegal aliens. They're protecting those who have been committing crimes. Just this morning, we saw the leader, one of the main leaders of MS-13 violent gang member, arrested and apprehended this morning in Virginia. So, I mean, this is just a very small place compared to really hundreds of little sanctuary cities throughout the entire United States. So it'll be interesting. I mean, given that you have some of the biggest sanctuaries jurisdictions in New York, Philadelphia, Chicago, Los Angeles. Who knows how many more could be there? So this is going to be a very monumental executive order, whether that's coming today or whether that's in the coming days.
Yeah, speaking of that MS-13 leader that was captured in Virginia, a lot of
Mhm.
tough talk coming out of the administration. Pam Bondi, Kash Patel did a press briefing. I guess from your perspective, from the White House's perspective, how much do they think that is playing a role in stopping people from even attempting to come across the border?
Oh, it's a huge role. I mean, others who were probably looking at coming into the United States are probably thinking otherwise now. They're definitely thinking twice. I mean, this administration has been very, very aggressive in its deportation campaign, whether it's, physically deporting them and arresting them and flying them out to, El Salvador, say, and that prison system, or just their messaging in general. I mean, from their actions to what they've been saying they're doing, everything that they said that they were going to do, they've been doing, and they've been doing a fabulous job. And I think that other states, if you're a bad guy, it's a bad day to be a bad guy. And that's exactly what the Trump administration is proving every single day. So definitely interested to see how many more could be apprehended, how many more that they'll go after across the United States, not just on the East Coast, but looking into other states as well. I mean, we know that Colorado, with Tren de Aragua, that was a huge bust of theirs, and looking forward to seeing them really go into these smaller jurisdictions because that might be where there's more density over there. So definitely huge for this Trump administration, and it's only been less than 3 months. So we'll see what happens over the next 4 years as far as immigration goes.
Yeah, it'll be great to see if the numbers keep dwindling at the border. Monica Page, Turning
Mhm.
Point's White House correspondent. Thanks so much for checking in with us.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, we will see how that whole sanctuary city thing turns out for those big blue lib cities. Speaking of things that are going to make big blue lib cities mad and big blue lib states mad, HHS has decided to cancel about $11 billion in, get this, COVID funding. That's still a thing. Like 5 years later, there's still COVID money going out from the federal government. Now, the libs are all upset about this because they're saying, well, this money was meant to do something and there's projects that'll be left unfinished. That's what the New York Times is saying. But at the end of the day, RFK saying the pandemic is over and HSS will no longer be wasting billions of tax dollars seems appropriate. Let's bring our panel back in to discuss this. Kevin, I want to start with you here. Why were we still spending any COVID money? And that's not even backtracking all the way back. Should we have ever done it? It's why were we still doing it before we can even get to whether it was a good idea overall?
Well, here's the thing, Joe Bob, is it was the biggest way for them to wash money to whoever wanted to fraud the government out of it in the first place. We know that millions, if not billions, were used from PPP loans and fraudulently taken out. And so what we're seeing here is just constantly what Doge has been doing is canceling spending that the average American didn't know was happening. But now that they do know, they're like, hey, what the heck? My taxes went up and this is what it was going to a pandemic that, let's be honest, did we really need all that money in the first place to go to as many things as it did? No, we didn't. And that's what Doge is doing, constantly cleaning house.
Yeah, I want to correct my statement a little bit earlier. The quote that I read was from HHS spokesman Andrew Nixon, not RFK, but I can't imagine RFK would think any differently. Beau, at a certain point, unfortunately, I think Americans are going to start looking at this sort of thing the next time libs are in power and thinking, wow, it turns out a lot of people were screwing over the government. I wonder how I can get in on that. Again, don't condone that, but I think that's going to actually start happening. Considering COVID money was still going around, is this going to be a big problem the next time the libs hold, well, geez, the majorities and the executive branch?
Yeah, I mean, you might as well get in on it, right? We went from 2 weeks to slow the spread to 5 years to stop the fraud, and I just think that's awfully ironic. I know if the liberals come to power, what I'm going to do is set up an NGO that's going to get government money, so I can become a millionaire overnight. I don't know why anybody wouldn't do it, right?
Yeah, I'm not going to say that you said that specifically. I think you know a guy that looks a lot like you that when the libs come into power may make, I don't know, a couple $1 billion
Yeah.
right off the bat.
By the way, I have a twin brother, so just letting everybody know.
Yeah. Yeah, I
Ironically,
like
has
that.
the same exact name.
I love the 2 weeks to slow the curve and 5 years to stop the fraud. That's a good one. You should patent that. Speaking of things that we were wondering why we were sending money to, I this kind of blew my mind. HUD, Housing and Urban Development, announced yesterday one of the similar reaction that I had of we were doing that. HUD said they were going to stop the Biden era policy that allowed illegal aliens to receive government-backed home loans. This ensures HUD resources will go to Americans and Americans only. Beau, first of all, did you know that we were giving money in terms of government-backed home loans to illegals, or at least that was an option for illegals?
I think they were doing it in Texas and California before this news broke. Yeah, so it's been happening. There were whole developments in Texas that were bought out and given to illegals, home loans. And listen, I love the cancellation. I've been working on my Spanish, and the only thing I have to say, hold on, I've been working on my. The only thing I have to say is adios.
I was half anticipating you blurting out somewhat of a I am here legally. Please give me a federal loan, because apparently it might be easier for you to apply if you're an illegal than you're an actual American citizen under the
It'd be pretty
previous
hard if I look like this,
administration. There you go. Yeah, you and Kevin wouldn't fare too well. Kevin, yeah, the crackdown says HUD is going to no longer issue public housing, no access to federal funded shelters, and no FHA loans to illegals. Why do libs think this is a good idea, especially considering we've talked about this a lot? I personally think letting a bunch of illegals from South America come into the country obviously is a dangerous from a gang perspective, but just politically speaking, let's just say you have a hardworking Latin American family. That pretty religious base, a lot of Catholics down there coming to the United States. I don't necessarily know. What I'm trying to say is that the libs betting that those people are going to eventually vote for them in the future, I don't know if that's a good bet. So why is it that libs were trying to push this stuff through?
Well, because they weren't getting the votes from the American citizens as is, so any bet is better than what they currently have. Along with the fact is I mean, who else is going to bring in the smuggled ninja swords? I mean, it's got to be these illegals from the southern border are bringing in those ninja swords, so that eventually we can get them over to the UK, and then that's how we're going to start funding Democrat campaigns somehow. No, I'm kidding. But when we look at these, as everything that's going on here, as Beau said, we know that lib states were funding these kinds of things a lot, and it's because just as I mentioned, is they were trying to in any way support people that would have a better chance of voting for them. Veterans who really could use the money, not going to vote for them. The average American who's struggling under their economy, not going to vote for them because they have nothing good to sell.
Yeah. I kind of am curious about both of your just generic thoughts about this. Currently speaking, the American people polling shows are really, really for Doge, right? Having said that, obviously the lib media and the mainstream media and the left has all said, well, this is just terrible that we are firing federal employees. Right now, as it stands, the American people are still behind getting rid of government waste and fraud and abuse and all that sort of stuff. At some point, though, and I'm just curious, Kevin, I'll start with you. Do you think they'll start to wane on that? Like, what is the time frame that the Trump administration has to do all this stuff before the American people, it's not the hottest topic in the world anymore, and they kind of get over the enthusiasm?
I think the average American I think some are already starting to honestly get a little antsy. Many thought that day one Trump would come in and the cost of their eggs, the cost of their gas, cost of everything would go down. And while in some sectors of America, parts of the economy is slowly recuperating, they're expecting a lot more, a lot quicker than it can happen. And so assuming that people get better tax breaks earlier on, I think many are getting antsy. But the fortunate thing about it is that Trump still has 3 years and 10 months left. So it doesn't matter necessarily. The American people can get a little bit fed up, but worst case scenario, he's got time to make sure these promises are kept.
Yeah, we will see if the American people can hold to that. Beau, I've only got 5 seconds. Do you want to practice the one word in Spanish that you know to end the segment?
Adios.
Beau Robertson, Kevin Phares, thanks so much for joining us. Really appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you, Jobob.
Thank you, Jobob.
Coming up on Turning Point tonight, we have an awesome clip from Alex Clark's Culture Apothecary podcast, as well as, well, my funnest segment where we get to read your emails. Again, tpt@tpusa.com. Email anytime, whether you agree or you're wrong. We'll get to all that and more coming up after the break. Don't go away. We'll be right back after this.